Beardo Benjo.
Last night I discovered the very limits of my own intelligence and confidence. Normally in these videos there's quite a large TV behind me, but you'll see today there's a more moderately sized television. If you'd like to hear the tale of why me, a man with no expertise in opening up or repairing televisions, thought he did in fact have the skill set to open up and repair a television, please let me know in the comments down below and I'll regale you with that tale. It is a sad tale, so prepare yourself for that if you want to hear about how I broke my TV. But that's not why we're here today. We're not here to talk about my broken TV. Today we're here to daydream, to think of possible franchises that, if converted into VR, would be absolutely stunning. Now today I'm going to share with you my top 10 first-person shooter franchises that I would love to see converted to VR. Before we get stuck into the video, just a few caveats. Firstly, these are just opinions. These aren't the definitive games, but they're the ones that I think personally would make the best fit for a VR conversion at some point down the line when those big developers start paying attention to how cool VR is. And secondly, I won't be touching upon games that already have mods or existing ways to play them in VR. So that being said, I won't include Half-Life because you can already play Half-Life in VR thanks to a fantastic conversion by Dr. Beef or Team Beef for the Oculus Quest. That all being said, let's get stuck straight in and have a look at my top 10 first-person shooter games that would be amazing in VR. Coming in at number 10 is one of my favourite games which bizarrely still feels underrated to me, even though I know it's beloved by so many people. Dishonored. I absolutely love Dishonored, and Arcane, the studio who make it, just don't make bad games. I absolutely adore the Dishonored franchise, I loved their reboot of Prey, and I can't wait to get stuck into Deathloop today. Now Dishonored for me is a perfect candidate for a VR game for so many reasons, but the biggest one that really stands out to me is the open-ended approach it has to the levels and the level design and the way you tackle your objectives. In Dishonored, there isn't a set path you have to walk. If you want to stealth a mission, you can. If you want to break in through a second story window and sneak through, taking out guards, you can. If you want to infiltrate the house through the sewers, you can. It's so open-ended, and that kind of gameplay isn't seen enough in VR. VR is the best medium for allowing you to feel like a character in a video game world. You have full control of your hands, you can do what you want, you can throw objects at other characters. The way you actually act is completely within your control. But too often, VR games don't give you enough ways to enact that control in the world, and Dishonored's open-ended approach to missions would be absolutely perfect. It also has a very VR-friendly art style, almost cartoony whilst also being quite realistic still, and it has some incredible abilities I would love to see pulled off in VR. Blink, which is one of your main abilities in Dishonored, already feels like teleporting in most VR games, so it's kind of a perfect fit. Dishonored in at number 10. In at number 9, a game that I think I would have placed a lot higher if it wasn't for another game coming out very soon, which is actually quite similar. Left 4 Dead. I absolutely love this game, so many people do. When this game came out, I actually went and bought loads of 30-foot long Ethernet cables and connected all the 360s in my house so I could play it with friends. I lived with a few friends at the time. If this game was converted into VR, I don't think I'd play many other co-op experiences. I think I'd sit in this for a long time. It's so visceral, it's so fast, and if you put it into VR, it would be absolutely terrifying. Those waves of zombies sprinting at you at full speed, it would be panic-inducing, and I want that so badly. There's a few Valve games on this list because I feel like their arcadey approach to first-person shooters would fit perfectly in VR, and Left 4 Dead with its endless amounts of maps, huge modding community, and just infinite replayability feels like a perfect candidate. It really does. Now, I did say I would have placed this higher if it wasn't for another game. We are getting After the Fall, coming very soon to VR headsets, all VR headsets, and that actually does feel like a Left 4 Dead in VR version. It has the co-op, it has the zombies, it has the fast frantic action, and it looks over the top gory. So I would have placed Left 4 Dead higher, but it looks like we're kind of getting that sometime very soon. In at number 8 is a game that really didn't find much critical or commercial success when it launched onto flat screen gaming platforms, but I think it would find a second lease of life in VR and would actually work a lot better as a VR game than it did as a flat screen game. Bulletstorm. Hear me out, I know not a lot of people really like this one. Bulletstorm's core concept was flashy, over-the-top, environmental and experimental kills, and they were chained together as quick as you could chain them together to create a really arcadey, replayable feel. That would work perfectly in VR. Being able to experiment with the environment, smacking people into spiked walls or killer plants that would eat them, flinging them up in the air and blowing them up like a firework. All the mechanics that exist within Bulletstorm have kind of been seen in current VR games anyway, or a few current VR games. Bring it all together, put Bulletstorm in VR, and I genuinely think it would find a perfect home. It didn't find much success when it came to flat screen, but I think it would be extremely successful in VR, and it just feels tailor-made for that kind of gameplay. In at number 7 is a bit of a wild one, but bear with me on this. Rainbow Six Siege, a game that I absolutely love but I'm absolutely dog shit at, so I just watch people who are better than me play it. Imagine that converted to VR, but more specifically co-location VR, room scale VR. Well, really here we're talking warehouse scale VR. Imagine going to a warehouse with a group of friends, strapping into VR headsets and playing basically a real life version of Siege. In that warehouse you can run around, one team can see a house they need to attack and the other team are inside that house trying to defend. It would be chaotic, amazing fun and would really show the true potential of co-location room scale VR. Space Pirate Train has done it recently with Arena and I think it's amazing. I think it's the start of something incredible and I can't wait to see where that tech goes. I want to go to a hall with some friends, strap into VR headsets and run around pretending we're in some place that we're not actually in. I think the potential is huge and I think Rainbow Six would be a really interesting test of that potential. In at number 6 is a guilty pleasure series for me that I will always love, even though they're very cookie cutter in their presentation and gameplay loops. Far Cry. I don't even particularly care which Far Cry would get converted to VR, just one of them please. Far Cry 3 or 5 preferably, I think they probably are the best in the series. Now I know a lot of people give Ubisoft stick for Far Cry because the gameplay at this point is very by the numbers. You go here, you synchronize this tower, you can then see your objectives, you hunt a few animals, you clear out a few compounds, you do a few missions. It's quite rinse and repeat, but imagine one of those huge, gorgeous open world playgrounds in VR. One of the things that VR is missing out on massively at the moment, and probably due to budget restraints and the size of the dev teams making these games, is those big open world, open-ended experiences. I'd love to drop into one of the islands from Far Cry in VR and be just let loose, allowed to run around, explore and take on those objectives in any way I saw fit. Yes, synchronizing towers is a little boring, but imagine actually climbing them in VR. Immediately that gameplay is rejuvenated, and yeah, Far Cry is a game that I think would benefit massively from a full VR conversion. In at number 5 is a game that isn't technically a first-person shooter, but is one of the best first-person perspective games I've ever played. Portal, Portal 2, or just go all in and make Portal 3 for us. I really don't care at this point. I just want to fling myself through infinite portals in VR. Now I know what you're thinking, that probably doesn't translate well into a VR experience. It's probably quite stomach churning and nausea inducing, but I think that's a good thing. I think we need to start seeing some more extreme VR experiences and games. There's a lot of VR players out there now, 5 years in, with very strong VR legs who want more extreme experiences, who want to be able to fling themselves at 300 miles an hour between this portal and this portal. The world of Portal is incredibly suited for VR in my opinion. It's got amazing characters, brilliant writing, it's immersive enough as a flat screen game, but imagine being in those test chambers and just really taking it all in, trying to figure out how to proceed and how to work out the puzzle. I know at one point Valve were toying with making Portal into a VR game, but genuinely opted out of it because they thought it would be too stomach churning for players. I think we need to start fighting back against that and testing the boundaries of what the most hardened VR players can comfortably enjoy and endure. I'm ready for it. Give me some more extreme experiences. Give me Portal in VR. In at number 4 is a game I genuinely thought was going to get a VR mode, and I kind of still think it might on the PS5 when PSVR 2 launches. Resident Evil Village. Now, Resident Evil 7 is one of my favourite games in the franchise, and the franchise is very, very dear to me. I've loved those games ever since I was far too young to be playing those games. Resident Evil 7 really took a chance on the first-person perspective shift, and in my opinion, it reinvigorated the entire franchise. It made it scary again, and it made it exciting again. Resident Evil Village then took all of that and just turned it up to 1,000 and threw a bunch of sexy vampires at it. So of course I want to experience that in VR. Resi 7 worked brilliantly as a PSVR title. I think it was exceptionally immersive and was probably the best way to play that game. Creeping through the Baker Mansion in VR was horrific. Playing it flat screen was fine. Playing it in VR, terrifying. And the same thing would be true if you converted Village into VR. I do still hope that Sony might have some cards up their sleeve and pull out a full VR version for PSVR 2, but we'll have to wait and see. Capcom are playing with VR. Resi 4 is coming to VR, so the possibility of Resident Evil games in VR in the near future is very real and is probably the most likely of everything on this list. In at number 3, my favourite first-person shooters of the last 10 years, maybe? Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. Now, I was really disappointed with Doom VFR. It was fine, but it was missing a lot of the most basic control options that VR games should have, and it didn't feel as visceral or as chunky as Doom 2016. I basically just wanted them to port Doom 2016 into VR and allow me to use my hands to actually stab things and shoot things, but Doom VFR wasn't that. Again, going back to the same point around Portal, Doom in VR is intense, it's fast. We've seen that with the Dr. Beef ports on the Quest. Doom 1, 2 and 3 all available in VR on the Quest. They are fast, they are frantic, and they are very gory, but they work really, really well. If you can convert those stunning Doom reboots, the newer Doom games, 2016 and Eternal, into full VR products, I would never want to leave. I'm not even fussed about the multiplayer aspect, but if you give me the campaign, I'd replay those levels over and over again. It's some of the best shooting, some of the best environments, and some of the most amazing enemy designs in first-person shooters right now, and it's just screaming for a VR port. I would absolutely love it. Have another run at it. Don't worry about Doom VFR, forget that. Try again with Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, please. I'd love to see it. In at number 2, the Master Chief himself, Halo. Is there a more iconic first-person shooter at this point in terms of its guns, its sounds, its enemies, its locations, its vehicles? Halo is such a juggernaut, and putting it into VR and allowing me to stand in front of a brute would be a dream come true for me. I want to step foot on a Halo ring and hold a plasma rifle in my hands. Games like Pavlov have already given us mods where we can experience some of Halo's most popular maps and guns, and it feels insanely good. Imagine that, but with the polish of Microsoft, the money and the backing of Microsoft, and the experience of 343 putting something together specifically for VR. At a point it felt like we were going to get it. There was a mod, a full VR mod being worked on for Halo Reach, but bizarrely, the person who was working on it, who is the same person who worked on the Alien Isolation Mother mod, was bought up by Microsoft and I believe now works for 343. So who knows, maybe at some point in the future Microsoft will wake up to the potential of VR and its launch title will be a Halo VR experience. I dream of that day and I can't wait for it to come. Halo in VR makes perfect sense, I would love to see it. Now, before I unveil the number 1 game that I think would be amazing in VR, some of you might be thinking, where's COD? Where's Battlefield? Where's Destiny? Where's Titanfall? Well, I couldn't include everything, and as I said at the start, this is just my personal preferences list. I feel that the other games I've mentioned in the list so far, and the one I'm about to mention, give players a more unique world to explore and a more unique set of gameplay mechanics. COD and Battlefield, for example, We already have a ton of military shooters in VR. Games like Onward, Pavlov and Contractors are doing a fantastic job at scratching that itch, so COD and Battlefield coming into VR would be stunning, but it wouldn't really bring anything new to the genre and the medium at this point in time. In at number 1, the game that I think would be the very best flat screen to VR first person shooter conversion of all time is Bioshock. Or more specifically, the entire Bioshock trilogy. I want to experience Rapture in VR. I want to walk those corridors and get a sense of how terrifying and dilapidated and claustrophobic that place is. And then I want to shoot a splicer right in the face. And then I want to stand in front of a Big Daddy and really get a sense of how big they are, how menacing they are, how terrifying they are. There are so many opportunities for iconic interactions in the Bioshock franchise if you convert it to VR. Imagine using your skyhook for the first time to ride the rails in Columbia. Imagine peering over the edge in Columbia and getting a sense of how high up you are, or again, how low down and claustrophobic and walled in you are in Rapture. Now, Bioshock for me has always felt like a horror game but wasn't a scary game. Convert it to VR and it's immediately going to be terrifying. Spider splicers running along the ceiling and hunting you down would be horrific but absolutely incredible. It's such an iconic franchise and the locations are so purpose built to be explored in an immersive first person way, and VR is exactly that. Now, I do kind of think at some point in time we will get this. I do believe that. Bioshock has existed on so many different platforms that it kind of feels like VR is the next logical step. And 2K at one point did kind of experiment with VR when they ported Borderlands 2 over. So a port of Bioshock or the Bioshock trilogy isn't completely out there in terms of believability. It's something I desperately want to see, and I really do hope we see it at some point. Bioshock would be the perfect flat screen to VR first person conversion. What did you think of my list? I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please do leave a like and please do drop a comment down below. Let me know which games you'd like to see in VR. This video was just focusing on first person shooters, but I will be thinking about horror games, puzzle games, open world games, third person action games in the future, and I might make some more lists. So please do subscribe if you enjoyed and want to watch me talk about more things. That would be fantastic. Honestly, I would love to see some of these high caliber games come to VR, and I do believe we will at some point in the future when VR grows to a point where devs look and go, I can make some money there. Let's give them some Bioshock. Hope you've enjoyed, guys. I'll see you very soon for another one. Take care. See you later.